Pope Leo XIV has finally broken his silence. After months of waiting, after a long period in which many wondered about his direction, his vision, and his priorities, he has given his very first interview. This act alone has become one of the most talked about events in recent church history. For a man who has held back from speaking publicly since his election, this sudden decision to grant not one but two meetings with a journalist signals more than a casual gesture. It signals the beginning of his pontificate on the world stage. Some look at this move with excitement, calling it an act of openness, a willingness to dialogue with the modern world, and a sign that he wishes to communicate broadly. Others, however, feel unease. They see this decision not as openness, but as the start of something that could lead to division among the faithful. The choice of platform, the words he used, and even the timing of the release all carry symbolic weight, and for many Catholics, this interview is more than just a set of personal reflections. It is a declaration of intent. The silence of Pope Leo XIV since his election was, for many, a sign of humility. In a time when the Catholic Church faces enormous challenges, scandals of abuse, declining trust, internal debates over doctrine, and growing pressures from the modern world, his decision not to rush into the spotlight seemed prudent. Silence gave the impression of a pope who wanted to listen first, to observe, and to understand before speaking. But when the moment came, it was not silence anymore. It was words carefully chosen, spoken in symbolic places, and recorded not for a small audience, but for the whole world to hear. His first interview was not given to a traditional Catholic newspaper or Vatican journal, but instead to Crux, a media outlet often viewed as having progressive leanings. That choice alone has drawn scrutiny. Why not speak first to a Catholic audience most committed to tradition? Why step into the arena of global and progressive media? For some, this signals a pope more interested in the world's applause than in the clear defense of the Catholic faith. For others, it signals a shepherd who wishes to meet people where they are, even if that means stepping outside traditional Catholic platforms. The interview was not a brief meeting either. It was spread across the long conversations, adding up to 3 hours. The first took place at Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer residence, a place tied to history and papal tradition. The second took place in the Vatican itself, in the Palazzo del San Efizio, a building deeply connected to the Church's doctrinal heritage. These settings carried meaning, as if the Pope was consciously linking his personal reflections to both the historic weight of the Church and the present moment of transition. But what makes these meetings even more striking is that they were not merely interviews, destined for a short article or a newspaper piece. They were the foundation for a book of full volume soon to be released, already described as a global event. The book is not a casual collection of memories, nor a spiritual meditation in the style of past popes. Instead, it reads as a program, a manifesto, a declaration of what this new pontificate intends to be. Already, before the book has even fully reached the hands of the faithful, it has created division. Its title, Leo XIV, Citizen of the World, Missionary of the 21st Century, does not present the Pope primarily as successor of Peter or guardian of Catholic truth, but as a figure of global dialogue and international presence. The language itself suggests a shift from Pope as defender of tradition to Pope as bridge with modernity. For some, this is inspiring, showing a pontiff ready to face the challenges of globalization, cultural exchange, and new questions. For others, it is alarming. It seems to place the papacy in categories borrowed from the modern world, categories that risk overshadowing the deeper mission entrusted by Christ himself. The strategy is evident. The book is being published in multiple languages with a carefully timed release. It first appears in Spanish in Peru, the land where Pope Leo once served as a missionary. Excerpts have already been made available in both Spanish and English, timed to coincide with his 70th birthday. Other editions, including English and Portuguese, are scheduled for later. But the global reach is guaranteed, with major publishers like Penguin and media platforms like Crux amplifying its release. The impression given is not of a local spiritual text, but of a worldwide launch, almost like the debut of a cultural product designed to shape opinion and gain attention. Critics fear that this transforms the Pope into a figure of media, a leader shaped by publicity rather than by the gravity of tradition. Supporters, however, see in this effort a chance for the Church to regain visibility, to speak across borders, and to remind the world of its mission in fresh language. Pope Leo's personal background explains much of this dynamic. Born in Chicago, raised in a modern American environment, He later chose to dedicate himself to missionary work in Peru, these two worlds, the urban, intellectual, and cultural setting of North America and the grassroots, often harsh realities of Latin America have deeply shaped him. He is both an academic and a pastor, someone who has taught and studied in universities, yet also someone who has lived among the poor and experienced firsthand the struggles of violence and poverty. This dual belonging gives him a perspective not rooted in Europe, the traditional heart of Catholic history, but in the Americas, where Catholicism has taken new forms. Some celebrate this as a sign of renewal, proof that the papacy is now truly global. Others worry that without the deep roots of Christian history found in Europe, the Pope may interpret the Chair of Peter more as a stage for global dialogue than as a defense of timeless truth. In the interview itself, the Pope structured his words into clear movements. The first part was biographical. He spoke of his childhood in Chicago, his decision to become a missionary in Peru, and the experiences that marked him as a priest close to the people. He recounted his service as superior of the Augustinians, as Bishop of Chiclin, and as prefect of the dicastery for bishops. He reflected on his relationship with Pope Francis and the events that led to his election. This section presented him as a human being, a pastor, someone who had walked a journey and carried experiences rather than a distant or abstract figure. It was warm, personal, even inspiring to many, but it was also striking in how little doctrinal depth it contained. Instead of theology, it was biography. Instead of strong affirmations of faith, it was stories of his path. Some welcomed this human side, while others wondered if it risked distracting from the doctrinal clarity that the Church now desperately needs. The second part of the interview, however, was far more controversial. Here Pope Leo XIV did not avoid the issues that have been dividing Catholics for years. He spoke about the abuse crisis, about synodality, about the role of women in the Church, about the inclusion of LGBTQ believers, and about ecumenism and interreligious dialogue. Each of these topics is explosive in its own way. Each has been the subject of fierce debates, passionate disagreements, and ongoing tensions. By addressing them, the Pope placed himself directly in the center of those debates. And while his tone was measured, the fact that he raised them at all was enough to ignite reactions. When Pope Leo XIV spoke about the abuse crisis, he emphasized the importance of transparency and responsibility. He acknowledged the deep wounds left behind by scandals that have harmed victims and weakened trust in the Church. He said that only honesty and openness can bring about healing. Many appreciated these words, but at the same time, others felt that they were not enough. People have heard calls for transparency before, and yet many feel that the Church has not gone far enough in truly purifying itself. For some, his words sounded sincere, but still too general, lacking the firmness and the concrete steps that many victims and faithful alike are hoping for. In this sense, the Pope's comments, while important, left behind both hope and uncertainty. Hope that he is ready to confront the past, but uncertainty about whether this confrontation will go beyond words and into decisive actions. When he turned to the topic of synodality, Pope Leo spoke about a shared journey, about the importance of listening, and about walking together as the people of God. On the surface, these are beautiful images, full of warmth and communion, but for many Catholics, the concept of synodality has become a source of tension. Some welcome it as a chance for renewal, for the laity to be heard, and for the Church to express itself in a less rigid way. Others, however, fear that this approach risks diluting authority, turning the unique role of the Pope and the bishops into something more like a mediator between opinions, rather than a guardian of truth. These critics fear that relativism may creep in, where every opinion is treated as equally valid, and the firmness of Catholic teaching becomes softened into endless dialogue, without clear direction. In speaking of synodality, Pope Leo once again placed himself in the middle of a delicate issue, one that has already divided parishes, dioceses, and Catholic communities across the world. The question of women in the Church came next, and here the Pope's tone was cautious. He acknowledged the importance of women and their contributions, and he suggested that new responsibilities might be possible. Some listeners interpreted this as a sign of openness to greater roles for women within church structures. Others feared that too much emphasis on dialogue might blur the boundaries of Catholic truth, making the Church appear less firm in proclaiming the gospel. To some, bridge building is noble. To others, it feels like compromise. In all these topics abuse, synodality, women, LGBTQ inclusion, ecumenism, the same pattern appeared. The Pope spoke in a calm and measured way. He did not make dramatic announcements, nor did he use harsh language. Yet the very decision to highlight these themes at the beginning of his pontificate shows where his focus may lie. His words reveal a pontificate that is ready to engage in dialogue with the modern world, even if it means stepping into areas of tension within the Church. To many Catholics, this is refreshing, a sign that the Pope is willing to face real problems rather than hide from them. To others, it is troubling, a sign that he may prioritize conversation with the world over the defense of tradition. What is certain is that his first interview and the book that follows mark the true launch of his pontificate. They are not just personal reflections. They are part of a carefully planned strategy to shape his image and his mission. The fact that the book is released through global publishers, translated into multiple languages, and promoted with careful timing shows that this is more than just a pastoral message. To the faithful, it is a presentation of the Pope as an international figure, someone who will speak not only to Catholics but to the entire world. For some, this is inspiring. For others, it is a reason to worry that the papacy itself could become a media brand, shaped by the rhythms of global publicity rather than by the timeless truth of the gospel. The biographical details shared in the interview highlight the Pope's unusual path. Unlike many of his predecessors, Pope Leo does not come from Europe. He is not shaped by centuries-old Catholic culture in Italy, Poland, or Germany. Instead, his roots are in the United States and Latin America. He grew up in Chicago, in a context marked by diversity, modernity, and the challenges of American life. Later, he immersed himself in the struggles of Peru, facing poverty, violence, and the difficulties of marginalized communities. This combination of North American culture and Latin American experience has given him a unique perspective. He knows the intellectual and academic world of universities, but he also knows the daily struggles of people living in harsh conditions. His background as a missionary has formed him into a man who values closeness to the people, while his education has given him tools to navigate intellectual debates. Yet this very dual background raises questions. Can a pope who has no deep roots in the historical heartland of Christianity preserve its legacy without being influenced too much by the language and expectations of the modern world? Can someone shaped outside of Europe guard the continuity of Catholic tradition? Or will he naturally lean toward presenting the papacy as a stage for dialogue with global culture? These are the questions that many Catholics are now asking, questions that may define the entire direction of this pontificate. In telling his personal story, Pope Leo sought to show his human side. He spoke warmly about his childhood, about the decision to leave behind comfort and go into mission, and about the experiences that shaped his heart. He presented himself as someone who has lived close to the poor, someone who has carried responsibility as a superior, a bishop, and eventually as a leader in the Vatican. He reflected on his relationship with Pope Francis, showing continuity with the previous pontificate. All of this was meant to reassure, to present a human and approachable figure. But at the same time, some wonder whether the emphasis on biography, on the human story, risks overshadowing the doctrinal clarity that a pope is called to provide. By contrast, the second part of his interview, the part dealing with controversial issues, revealed much about the direction he wishes to take. His choice to highlight abuse, synodality, women, LGBTQ inclusion, and interreligious dialogue shows clearly that he intends to confront the great debates of today. These are not peripheral topics. They are central to the tensions within the Church, and they are central to how the world perceives the Church. By starting here, Pope Leo indicated that his pontificate would not shy away from confrontation, even if it risks division. His approach is one of dialogue, measured speech, and openness. But openness always carries risks, and the risk here is that openness may be interpreted as compromise. The deeper we look at Pope Leo XIV's first interview, the clearer it becomes that he is setting a tone that will define his time as pontiff. Every word, every choice of theme, and every gesture seems carefully planned. He did not rush into the public eye immediately after his election. Instead, he allowed a period of silence to pass, perhaps to let expectations build, perhaps to give himself time to think. But when he did decide to speak, he spoke in a way that made sure the entire world would listen. He chose settings that were full of symbolism. He chose a media outlet known for its progressive leanings. And he chose to give not just a short statement, but a long conversation that would be turned into a book. This was no accident. It was a decision made with clear intention. and the intention seems to be to place his pontificate on the world stage right from the beginning. The title of the book that resulted from these conversations